Hello, chemists and cavaliers. My name is TBSky, and Riot recently have been on a bit of a roll, pumping out new lore for older champions and slight lore updates for newer champions that may need it. So there's a short story for Talon and Katarina that came out today, which we'll tackle in another video. Malphite also had a substantial lore update recently, which is lovely, which is also probably the subject for another video. But in this particular video, we're going to tackle two lore updates that came out specifically today, and that these being the ones that you already know, you saw the title of the video, Kled and Singed. And they are two completely different scopes of lore updates, because Kled has pretty much just had a little, what Riot Scathlock on Twitter called an editorial pass. Like, just the editors and the writers at Riot looking over this thing and going, maybe we should just streamline some bits here and cut some stuff and change a few minor details, but nothing major, no real change to the substance of the character. Singed, on the other hand, has had an entire new bio invented for him where pretty much he didn't have one before. So, we'll start with the shorter one of the two, and that is Kled the Cantankerous Cavalier. So, the basic outline of Kled's bio is he's this legendary angry yordle who shows up in Noxian fights every once in a while, screaming and shooting things and claiming territory as his own, yada yada yada. The earliest mention of Kled in the historical records was at the First Battle of Drugne. In the dusty hills of those Badlands, the war host of General Savan was on the run from barbarian foes. Having lost the previous two engagements, morale was low. So, this is what the bio says now. And that's pretty much the same thing that the bio used to say. The old bio is exactly the same story, but with a few bits and details changed. And I think the best way to illustrate the changes is to start by looking at how Kled is introduced in the bio in its original version. Then, as the morning sun rose, the mysterious figure of Kled appeared on the hilltop overlooking the battlefield. He rode Skarl, an immortal desert Dracolops. The mount stood on only two legs, its ear-like forelimbs fanned from the side of its head hanging down apologetically, like a butler who had accidentally dipped his hands in soup. The lone rider stood on his steed's saddle. His weapon was rusted, his armor was worn, and his clothes were tattered, but a relentless anger burned from his one good eye. "I'll give you one chance to get off my land," Kled announced to the barbarian horde, but the yordle didn't wait for their answer. He spurred his steed and angrily screamed his charge. Desperate, starving, and furious with the nobles, the legion's anger ignited like blasting powder at the yordle's insane act of bravado. The enlisted men rushed after Kled and Skarl as they tore into the center of the enemy formation. That's how he's introduced in the old version of the bio. Here's how it goes in the new one. Then, as the morning sun rose, so far so similar, the lone figure of Kled appeared on the hilltop, mounted upon a desert Dracolops. This warrior's weapon was rusted, his armor worn, his clothes tattered, but contempt and anger burned from his one good eye. So this is a condensation of this. It's basically these two paragraphs being merged into one, dropping a lot of the details about how Skarl is an immortal desert Dracolops, how he stands on two legs, ear like forelimbs, blah blah, butler, hand in soup, etc. and so on. It also drops the bit where Kled announces, like, "I'll give you one chance to get off my land." That one is also dropped. He just bellows an ultimatum to the barbarian horde, and then he charges in. And so that's pretty much the shape of the edits that have been made to Kled's bio. No substantial changes to the meaning of the story or the substance of the bio, but just little updates, little streamlinings to kind of trim some of the fat and make the thing read a little bit more cleanly and easily. And generally, this is a positive change in my book, because like I always appreciate when there's an economy of words, like when you strip back stuff that isn't really necessary and focus in on the core things that are needed for the story. And I think like the description of Skarl and stuff like that doesn't really do anything for this particular version of the story. Like, the Skarl being immortal doesn't really matter that much. Skarl being apologetic, looking like a butler, having floppy ears, doesn't really matter that much for this particular bio. Like, in other contexts, that information might be interesting and funny, but that's more for, like, an actual narrative short story rather than recounting of the first time that he shows up. So, like, those little, oh, hey, yeah, we can improve this a little bit. That's stuff that kind of always just makes me happy. Like to see writers go back and edit things and go, hey, we can trim fat out of that. Because that's very much also like when I write anything creative, that's usually my process is I'll write something, wait 2 weeks, go back to it, and it's like, oh no, too many words, cut them all. And it's healthy. Like, I think it's healthy to have that process and to think about that process. So that was I just thought that was nice. The more interesting detail, perhaps for people who aren't me, is the specific change to who it is that's leading the Noxian war host. So, In command of the Legion, this is the old bio, was a gaggle of wealthy nobles bedecked in spotless golden armor. They were more concerned with their appearances and the intrigues of their class than the men they were commanding. Worse, these commanders, though well-versed in assassination and tournament fighting, had proven hopeless on the field. With the remains of this army surrounded by enemy forces, the nobles ordered the Legion into a defensive circle in hopes of negotiating ransoms for themselves. That has changed a little bit. Here, in the dusty hills of those Badlands, the war host of General Savan was on the run from barbarian foes. Having lost the previous 2 engagements, morale was low, the supply train had been abandoned in the rout, and they were a week's march from the nearest outpost. Savan, in his spotless armor, seemed more concerned with how this would appear back home than the welfare of his soldiers, and ordered a defensive circle formation to buy himself time to think. So there's a slight change here, that the Noxian war host, rather than being commanded by nobles, air quote, like vaguely, just some nobles, don't know who they are, just nobles who are useless and stupid and don't know how to fight in war. Here they are commanded specifically by a General Savan. Now, what's interesting about Savan is that Elise married into a noble house called Savan, which is said Savan. But this guy's called General Savan, which is said Avan. And I can't help but wonder if maybe either someone at Riot made a typo and put the double A in the wrong position, and we have got a little bit of world building for the house that Elise married into, or is this just a complete coincidence where 2 writers at Riot came up with a similar sounding name and didn't check against whether it was already in use? Don't know, but interesting detail nonetheless that this is here. The more substantive thing about it is that here we have an actual character name replacing, like, just a generic, oh yeah, arrogant nobles who don't know how to fight. No, this is one specific dude. Which, I don't know how much to read into that. Probably not a lot, but it feels a little bit like refocusing from, oh, nobles are useless, rank-and-file soldiers are the people, are, like, cool, clever people, to, rather than a failure of the nobles as a class of people, it's the failure of, like, one dude who's bad at his job. Which, thematically, is a very slight shift in the way that things are portrayed here, but probably in the broader term, unless there's, like, a substantial lore update relatively happening in Noxus, doesn't mean that much. I'm overthinking this vastly. Let's move on to Singed. Singed is a different case from Kled, because here is, hang on. Here is what Singed bio was up until recently. Singed is a deranged chemist from Son who is as brilliant as he is amoral, a child prodigy, blah blah, taught himself chemtech, and he's been alive for like a century, extending his life through volatile chemicals and self-performed surgery, and then he's like, he seeks knowledge and stuff. This is the full extent of Singed's old bio. There's a little bit more of it now. This is a full bio update, giving Singed a place in the world of Runeterra that he kind of didn't have before. Like, before, Singed motivations was like, he wants to seek knowledge and do smart science stuff. But there was no real depth to his characterization there. He was just like, oh yeah, evil scientist guy who wants to do science good. This has changed somewhat in the new bio. The new bio does a much more extensive job of, like, it pretty much bases itself on the same set of ideas, but it expands them substantially and gives him much more of a readable character. So what we have here is an establishment of a conflict between 2 different kinds of Piltover Sonite science, which ties very well into the general central theme of Piltover and Son, which is a class divide between 2 different kinds of society. Gleaming golden Piltover with its hex-tech technology and wealthy merchants and high-minded ivory tower scientists sitting up there in their libraries and thinking about, oh, the good fancy things that we shall do with our brains in the coming golden age of knowledge-making or whatever. And then the working-class, downtrodden, oppressed, proletariat of Son, dominated by chem barons and, like, polluted, dirty industry, like, chem-punky, just ugly, grimy. Like, that split between 2 different visions of a scientific future, utopian and dystopian, is being reflected here in Singed as well, because Singed is a scientist who does a lot of research into the natural sciences. As a child, let's just read it, actually, rather than me trying to describe it. As a child, he displayed a prodigious intellect and a boundless sense of curiosity. The principles and interactions of the natural world fascinated him, eventually leading him to pursue a scholarship at the prestigious University of Piltover. It did not take long for his brilliance to be recognized. Singed's research into the natural sciences was impressive, groundbreaking, even. But he found that Piltover's attention had been stolen away ever since the discovery of Hextech and the opportunities of the hybrid of magic and technology, and the opportunities that the use of hybrid magic and technology presented. Singed found himself on the outside looking in, seeing magic as a crutch leaned upon by those who were either incapable of understanding how the world worked or simply didn't care enough to find out. He became a vocal critic of what he saw as a new and ignorant fad within the university. Singed instead delved into the chemical potential of alchemy, and despite the boon his intellect garnered for the field, his efforts earned him little more than the ridicule of his fellow academics. Before long, his funding had dried up, and he was forced out of the university and out of Piltover. Singed had no choice but to begin a new life in Son. In the Undercity, life was cheap and the demand for innovation high. Right, so Singed is someone who sees the intellectual state of Piltover, like this obsession with Hextech technology that has driven the prosperity of that city, as kind of an ignorant crutch. It's like, oh yeah, just using fucking magic, learn to do some science, you dumb nerds. Like, that's basically his attitude towards it, and that drives him to Son, where he can pursue that kind of research unfettered by ethics, but also unfettered by, like, the philosophical difference between him and his peers, where his peers believe much more in sort of the magic technology of Hextech. He believes much more in the natural sciences, which is an interesting way to characterize the character. And it's something that we've kind of seen also in the split between Jace and Victor, where Jace represents this kind of Hextech thinking, but also the arrogance of Piltover, the self-centeredness of Piltover, and sort of the cold, uncalculating impersonability of Piltover. And Victor, on the other hand, represents in some ways more humanist perspective, in that he's interested in using science and technology specifically to improve the bodies and the physical existences of human beings, but is also kind of unconcerned with the high-minded ethical principles that are being forced on him in Piltover. So this split between two different visions of what science is and what science can be is at the core of Victor and Jace's conflict, and the conflict between Son and Piltover, and now it's also at the core of the conflict that Singed finds himself inside. So that's, like, thematically, that makes him a much stronger, much more interesting character. It makes him someone who has an actual ideology, some kind of belief system that drives him and causes him to take the actions that he takes. Specifically, he's driven into desperation by Piltover's refusal to allow, to support his scientific inquiries. And so in Son, where, like, there are no ethical restrictions so long as you have money, he basically begins to work for chem barons, and he begins to work on science of questionable ethicality, augmenting humans, animals, and even fusions of the two among countless other endeavors. Nonetheless, he pushed his new field forward at an incredibly rapid pace, but often at the expense of his own health. Understanding better than anyone the chemical needs of a living body, he engineered stimulants that could keep him alert and working for weeks at a time before he would collapse, shivering and feeble, and sleep for days on end. And here we see an integration of Singed's actual in-game kit a little bit into his lore, i.e., he uses stimulants to keep himself going, but it's also clearly taking a toll on him, which is something we see reflected in his character design. This is why, in terms of the lore, it is explaining to us why Singed is thin as a stick and yet somehow still manages to be a tank, while he's juicing himself up with God knows how many powerful chemicals that allow his body to do stuff that it really shouldn't be able to do. And eventually, desperate for funding for his research, he's picked up by Noxus, who needs some help with a little project that they've got going on called the Invasion of Ionia. And Singed, for that, invents a new kind of weapon. He invents alchemical fire, or rather an alchemical fire that is unstable, volatile, and utterly horrifying, which is deployed in the war against Ionia, causing pretty much the backstories of characters like Riven, Master Yi, and Wukong. Like, a lot of Ionian champions have some part of their bio or their story that mentions, oh yeah, like, the war crimes that Singed enabled by, like, poisoning the world with chemical weapons. Yeah, that fucked with us a little bit. That pissed us off kind of a lot. And so like, Singed is an important character to a lot of other characters in the game, but his own process of, like, why did he invent that stuff has never really been explored until here, where it's like, well, he's desperate for money. And at this point, so long as they paid his fees, Singed didn't care. Like, so he's been pushed into this immorality and this complete amoral pursuit of science by the rejection of Piltover, as well as his own, you know, massively prodigious ego. And so the final note here is one specifically related to Warwick, that Singed is... The reason why Singed is pursuing biological experiments like the one that created Warwick is because, well, he's realized that his time on this Earth is kind of running out. His, Singed nonetheless feels the weight of years upon him. His most recent work has taken a decidedly more biological angle and of a far more dramatic scope. A recent exercise in the melding of animal, man, and machine left his laboratories in ruins, his face held together with filthy bandages, and his subject freely prowling the streets of Son. Yet Singed remains undeterred. He has already mastered the destruction of flesh, and thus now has turned to the preservation and transformation of it, and perhaps even the possibility that life need not end with an inescapable death. So Singed's motivation at this point has transformed into, okay, he's doing biological research on how to keep a body going beyond its natural expiration date, or in his case, its extremely unnatural expiration date. He's trying to sort of use the science that he's been pursuing to cheat death, to cheat mortality, and to extend his own life on Earth. And in so doing, he ends up creating poor, broken monsters like Warwick to roam around the worlds of Son. So in general, as a bio update, this is a much more extensive look on who Singed is as a person, what he wants, why he wants those things. And it's not like sympathetic. He clearly is an amoral, psychopathic asshole who's, like, perfectly willing to sacrifice anyone and anything for the pursuit of his own ends, but it gives him a more comprehensible characterization, and it, as a bonus, it also ties in well with his character design. Like, okay, so the concept of Singed is basically someone who's probably quite frail and physically quite weak, but who is, who's nonetheless empowered by the chemistry that he carries on his back. And the reason why he's so eager and willing to use all of this biological chemistry and all of this toxic and poison on himself and others is because, well, he feels like he was driven to it. Like, he feels like he was forced into using this stuff and using these methods because, well, otherwise how would he ever be able to pursue his science? So, generally speaking, a really solid lore update that makes Singed a much more well-rounded character, which has been necessary for a long time because, like I said, he's important to Warwick and he's important to, like, much of Ionian history. So it's been a little bit of a black hole in the center of League of Legends lore that he used to only have, like, this. Now, the next thing I'd like to see, of course, from Singed, as I always want to see about all of the champions, are actual stories where he acts as an actual, you know, antagonist, as a person who is involved with the things that are happening, which, if we're lucky, is the kind of thing that we might be getting with Arcane. Once that comes, like, Singed might be a character in that. Who knows? It's not really clear who exactly the characters in the trailer so far are, but he might be a character in there, especially since he's so closely tied to both Piltover and Son. As a character who has existed, like, in both environments. Which, like, would put him on the timeline, at least, in the space of time where Vi and Jinx are first coming up in that, like, in their childhoods, Singed would also have been there. So that feels plausible to me. Anyway, solid couple of lore updates, very different scopes. I'm always fascinated to see edits and changes like this. Like, it's one of those things that just tickle me, particularly to see writers go back and go, okay, we can streamline this, we can edit this to be better. It doesn't have to be set in stone once we publish it, at least not on the internet anymore. We can go back and make this stuff read better and be more efficient with our word choices. Did I have anything else to say? No, I don't think so. We'll tackle Malphite and Talon's lore updates, or rather the short stories that they've been getting, in separate videos later on. So if you'd like to see that, there's a subscribe button, which will tell you when those videos come out, as well as other videos that I also do on the channel. I do lots of videos. You should check them out. They're good, I hope. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified, like, to be sure that you are notified when those things come out, because otherwise it's kind of a crapshoot whether YouTube bothers to tell you about it or not. Yes, and also like and comment and do all of those other things. And the reason why YouTubers like me always tell you to do the like and comment and subscribe thing is not just because we are egomaniacs who need the validation. I mean, it's definitely also that, but it's not just because of that. It's because the way YouTube works is the algorithm checks how many people are engaging with a video. Not just how many people are watching it, but how many people are interested enough in the video to click a button at some point during the proceedings. And if lots of people click a button at some point during the proceedings, the algorithm goes, oh, that video must be good. I should show that to other people as well. I don't know why the algorithm has that accent, but yeah, we should show that video to other people. And if people don't click a button at some point, it goes, well, I guess they're watching it, but they're not engaging with it, so we will bury it in a shallow grave and burn it. Like, more or less, that's how it works. So if you want to help me out, the like button is the best way to, like, if you don't want to bother writing a comment and if you don't necessarily want to subscribe, the like button is very nice. And if you do want to watch more videos, subscribe is very good. And also, please do that with other YouTubers who you follow. Like, if you want to help our work, the like, comment, and subscribe buttons and the bell icon, that's stuff that YouTube tracks that you can just click on, and that helps us out. If you want to help me out more directly than that, then I have a Patreon, I have a merchandise store, I have a tip jar, and you can find links to all of that down in the descriptions, and if you want to avail yourself of any of it, I'd be very grateful for the help. But if you don't want to support me directly with, like, direct donations and money, that's completely fine. Don't worry about it. The thing I do try to encourage people to do generally on my videos, though, is if there are online content creators whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly with anything you can. Like, anything you can, whenever you can. Because that $1 donation that doesn't feel like very much, it's actually the same as literally thousands of views on a video. Like, with the way that ad payments work on YouTube and stuff like that, it's literally the same as giving someone thousands of views on a video. So, even if you don't want to support me, that's completely fine. But for those content creators whose work you do enjoy, please consider donating directly to them and helping them out with whatever you can, whenever you can, because it makes much more of a difference than you think. Anyway, what else do I need? I need to pitch stuff at the end of my videos, because that's the job. I have a second channel. I do Let's Plays over there. Also, I stream on it. You can go and subscribe to it if you want. It's fun. I have fun there. I'm playing Final Fantasy VIII right now, and soon we'll be starting in on Majora's Mask. So if you're interested, okay, I think that's all. I think that's it. I'm done pitching stuff. I'm done telling you to like and subscribe things. I think. Yes. I have done my job. Good. Thank you for watching.